Hello, everyone, and welcome to Open Minds on Air, the official podcast of the Open Minds Foundation. You can find everything you want to know about this show and the foundation by going to openmindfoundation.org. I am your co-host, Pearse Redman, and this month, on this month's episode, we're going to be starting the first in a series that we're tentatively calling Undue Influence in Pop Culture, where we take a look at TV shows, movies, books that discuss undue influence and other things as well. And we sort of we're going to kind of parse it out, talk about what these shows get right, what they get wrong, how this influences our perspective on cults and high control groups and things of that nature. This month, I am joined by Spike Robinson, who is the advisory board coordinator and assistant editor here at the Open Minds Foundation. And Spike, I've mentioned before on the show, she helps me out tremendously behind the scenes, and I wouldn't be able to, do the podcast and get it out there and all that stuff without Spike's tremendous help. And she also does a ton more for the Open Minds Foundation. So, Spike Robinson, welcome to the podcast. Glad to have you on.
Pleasure to be here, Pearse. This has been too long in coming.
Yes, I know. This is an idea that we had toyed around with, I think, like before we even started the podcast. We had talked about the idea of looking at popular culture and instances where they portray cults and things like that. So it'll be really fun. But before we kind of dive into today's episode, why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself? Who is Spike Robinson?
Well, Spike Robinson is somebody who is, let's see, I'm an artist, a dreamer, a musician, and a card-carrying geek. And what's more, let's see, I got in the Open Minds Foundation basically because I was in a very high control group just coming out of graduate school. And when I got out, the only people who could tell me what I'd been through were these ex-Scientologists on the old early message boards back in 97, 98 or so. And so I started cult watching. And a few years later, I thought, well, why can't I make this my job? And then within a couple of months of deciding I wanted to make this my job, suddenly I was working for John Atack. It was like being a rock and roll fan and suddenly being the driver for, Mick Jagger or something.
Yes, no, that's actually similar to how I felt when I first had John back on my radio show. I was super excited, and then when we were talking about doing this, and he said, "Yes, let's do it together." It was very much like getting hired by your favorite musician or someone extremely important. So very cool. And
the wonder of the Open Minds Foundation is that we're just growing. So it's really interesting to see where we've been and where we've gone and where our website has gone, and just the fact that we've got people all over the world contributing and bringing in things and talking, and that I'm able to write blog posts about Star Trek, and I just did one about Harry Potter, and being able to combine my geekiness with my love of studying undue influence.
No, absolutely. And again, encourage people to, if you are new to the Open Minds Foundation, if you're new to this podcast, definitely check out the Open Minds Foundation blog. There's a ton of great articles, many of which are written by Spike, and I highly encourage that. And we'll probably link up to a few of those that are sort of closely related to the show that we're going to be looking at today, which is Star Trek. We're talking about the original Star Trek. This is with Captain Kirk and Spock. I guess, just as a quick aside, both Spike and I are big Star Trek fans, although I am a Deep Space Nine fan, first and foremost. I think Spike is more of an original and next gen as well, right?
I'm original, and next gen is my third place winner, Voyager, because...
Oh, right, okay.
Captain Catherine Janeway is da bomb.
And I guess do let us know what your favorite Star Trek series is, and we thought that Star Trek would work well because there are lots of episodes across all of the series that deal
episodes, yeah. this whole idea was started with the fact that I originally wanted to do a top 10 old Star Trek episodes that had coercive control in it. And of course, that went into 1,200 words before John said, no, Spike, cut it down to one episode. And then I ended up doing the Games of Triskelion, the one where they're fighting in this sort of gladiator planet for the pleasure of 3 disembodied glowing brains.
Which is a classic episode, and that, has been, recreated in multiple TV shows. And in fact, actually, Return of the Archons, which is the first, we're going to be looking at 2 episodes. We're looking from season 1 of the original Star Trek, episode 23, The Return of the Archons, and then that's episode 22. And then episode
21 and 23.
Oh, okay.
Archons is 21, Return of the Archons is 23, and just before anybody thinks that I'm being, I've got them off the top of my head, no, I just happen to have the Star Trek fan concordance by Betty Joanne Trimble here, the A to Z guide to the classic original television series. And so I've got all the air dates and everything. I don't have this off the top of my head. I'm not that geeky. Yes.
So I guess we'll sort of dive right in with the Return of the Archons, which is it's I think an episode that a lot of people will be kind of familiar with, even if you haven't seen Star Trek. This episode has also been parodied in multiple other TV shows. There are lots of little things in there, lines and whatnot that you will have heard and other things. It reminded me of an episode of South Park where the kids take over the town. There's lots of similar phrases and things that are used.
Outs to it. This one is basically. Do you want me to do a nutshell of?
Yeah, give us a little the thumbnail of what this episode
is. Thumbnail is, let's see, right from the book. The USS Archon disappeared near Beta 3 over 100 years ago. The Enterprise finds the first landing party act strangely. That's where Sulu gets beamed back to the ship and is going, "Oh, I am Landru's and I am peace and all of this," and is speaking like a robot. And so they go down to find out what the heck happened, and they find a bunch of people all acting like robots, and these lawgivers walking around in bathrobes going, "I am the will of Landru," and they basically get help from a couple of friendly natives, find that Landru is a computer. Spoiler alert. Do we need spoilers?
No. Yeah, we'll say it, but there's full spoilers for both episodes.
This is just about as old as I am as we were talking. I was born shortly after these, so these were made. So we don't need spoilers for something that's 50. No. But in any case, they find out that Landru is a computer, and they guilt complex it into killing itself, which is one of the many times that they actually talk a computer to death in this show. That's a not talk about other science fiction tropes there.
Yeah, so that is the overview of the episode. Again, encourage everyone to probably go and watch these before listening too much, more of this podcast, because we're going to be exploring all sorts of aspects of it. But that's the general overview. And I guess we wanted to pick this, and then, like we said, we're going to also be looking at A Taste of Armageddon, because they're sort of two almost polar extremes of mind control, of brainwashing. And in the Return of the Archons, we get the ultimate kind of like Hollywood form of brainwashing or mind control. So Sulu and all of the people have this kind of glassy-eyed look.
Blissed-out.
Yes.
Was what blissed-out automaton. And unable to recognize his friend. And what's also funny is it happens immediately, because the first few moments, Sulu's himself, he's getting chased by the guys in the robes, and they point this stick at him. Blim! Oh, peace, tranquility, and joy be yours. So the immediate brainwashed. So yes,
and the and I think there's a line. One of them might have been Bones says, they have this mindless contentment about them.
Mindless vacant contentment. Spock said
Oh,
that.
Spock, yeah, and
I don't.
and all of the people there, they also engage in like this weird behavior. It's called like the Red Hour, I think.
They do a purge. They do
Yeah,
basically
yeah, it's like the
how
movie
it
Purge.
happens, we don't know, but festival from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m., everybody goes insane, breaking tables, windows,
Having their way with one another.
in the street. Yes, I was trying to think of a delicate way to put that. But also before it happens, they're blissed out. They're walking with their hands on their hearts, and they speak in this highly stylized language. He be on the village, and
Yes.
very, very. But yeah, they totally go into a purge for 12 hours at least, and we don't know. I'm assuming it's an annual thing.
Yeah, yeah. I
That's
think
just my
that's
assumption.
right. In a festival. This also, if people think this sounds familiar, this is like an exact episode of Rick and Morty. With the
Oh God, yes,
festival, they're
purge.
dressed in the same style of clothing as Return of the Archons.
Well, you know where they probably got those costumes from.
For in Star Trek, from where?
Yeah, think what else was being filmed in that same studio? Bonanza.
Bonanza.
um,
Right.
in fact, I think Juju, the guy who plays McCoy. Oh my God, bad Spike, no biscuit. DeForest
Yeah.
Kelly, I believe, was he in Gunsmoke or Bonanza? He did a couple guest shots
Oh,
there.
I think Gunsmoke, but
Yeah, they had all the 19th century costumes there, so put them on.
mm. Well, let's dive into and kind
Yeah.
of pick apart this episode because again, this is like I said, this is the sort of the base level kind of Hollywood portrayal, and
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that Spike and I want to do with this new series, Undue Influence in Pop Culture, is also kind of break down the portrayals of this stuff because for better or worse, like it or not, a lot of our perspectives, our ideas about people in cults, people in high control groups, people who are manipulating individuals, really does come from film and TV and books. It comes from popular culture.
It
It
does.
it shapes our perspective way more than we may want to kind of believe. And I think it also
I
it
can think of a current Scientologist, no names, who,
mm,
when asked about whether or not Scientology was a cult, said, "Do I look brainwashed?"
mm,
And you knew that what she was thinking of was this episode of
yeah.
Star Trek.
Right, and I think it also it can be dangerous too because it instills a very kind of like false idea or notion of what
Mhm.
people suffering
And
from.
how it happens.
Yes, exactly, and how it happens. And I think it's very easy. We live in a culture where it's very strange. Pop culture is obsessed with cults as of late. There's all of
Oh,
these documentaries. I mean, we've spoken about this before. There's Wild Country.
the
Um,
Path, the Circle,
yes,
Handmaid's Tale.
absolutely.
Yeah.
There's a lot of Scientology documentaries. Everyone is making a Scientology documentary. Uh, but you know, at the same time, I think a- there's something a little exploitative about a lot of these films that are coming out. There's something that also fetishizes cults, and it's
And
very
they
odd.
show
We
aftermath, but they never show how the people got in. So
yeah.
you see all the disconnection. I mean, Leia's show is great. Don't get me wrong, absolutely wonderful. But she's showing the aftermath. It's called the aftermath, so of course. But everybody in the comment section, and oh, why do we read the comments, Pearse? Why do we read the comments? But well, how could they get into that? I would never get into it. They must have been really dumb to get into something like that.
Mm.
So, the Hollywoodized version of how manipulation happens and that's why we picked these two episodes. Was what we've got is the Hollywood version, and then we've got a culture stepping ahead where everybody willingly will commit suicide,
Mm.
and yet they're not acting at all like they're in a cult.
No, and I guess let's also break down some of the the tropes and archetypes of the
Oh,
quote
I love
unquote
tropes.
mind control in the Return of the Archons. We've got people that they become quote absorbed and become part of
Mhm.
Landru, part of the body. So again, this is typical to there's a lot of kind of strange esoteric language that's going on. They which is not that's not necessarily incorrect. People that are in
No,
high
no,
control
word
groups talk like
salad.
that all the time.
Yeah, word salad does exist. There's that one wonderful scene where they're in the cell, and McCoy, who's already been quote unquote absorbed, is saying, "Are you of the body?" And
Yes.
Kirk answers, "The body is one." And they just do this whole word salad where it's the body and one and peace and
Landru.
tranquility. And I even wrote down one that was just too good not to quote directly here, where he says, because it sounds like the mission statement to any good cult: a world without hate, without fear, without conflict, no disease, no war, no crime. The good must transcend the evil.
Yeah, that does. It is like the the epitaph for every cult out there or something. Um,
Oh God, yes. But I mean, yeah, the whole trope of the stylized language, the monotones of the "you will come"
mm,
and "you will be absorbed," and even the guys who are so-called immune to the mind control are still, that's the thing, they're under real mind control, the guys
yes.
who are immune, because they have got some serious phobia induction going on there.
Right. They're afraid to even utter Landru's name. They're afraid to, even though we find out that there are three older guys who are part of some sort of a resistance group.
Hmm.
They are immune to Landru's mind control, brainwashing techniques, which are never really explained.
They
It's
just
not.
strap you in a box and show you some pretty lights, and suddenly you're
Yeah,
talking
and
peace
then
and
you're
tranquility.
right. You're sort of part of that. But I guess also
Whole big soup dance.
but the lawgivers can also mind control you with their staffs.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah, or kill you too. And
yeah,
one of the guy who's just steps out. I hear the will of Landru and willingly steps and boink.
mm.
Yeah.
Now we find out that these three guys are somehow immune to this power. Yet, as Spike was just saying, they are the true kind of mind control victims because their entire existence is still being manipulated by Landru, even though they are immune to his psychokinetic powers or whatnot.
But they know it. They know the rooms are bugged. They know
Yes.
that at any point they might be killed. They are in terror. I
Mm.
mean, look at that Redger guy. He's flinching.
Yes. Well, and that's a funny thing too.
Trembling.
They believe that there is a prophecy that
Mm.
the quote return of the Archons, and that they believe that is Kirk and Spock and everyone, that they are this prophecy is being fulfilled. Yet even though they're excited that they're there, they still won't actually go and defeat Landru. It takes a
And
lot of convincing.
that's the thing that I noticed for the first time last night when I was watching. It was like, oh my God, they're so scared of change. They're actually in learned helplessness,
Hmm.
and they've got some serious phobia induction because they don't know what's going to happen. And when we get into Taste of Armageddon, we'll see some really serious phobia induction. But there, you can see the dread going on. What's going to happen next? In fact, you see what? Do you notice where the mind control breaks for? What is his name? The guy in the red robe, red priest's robe,
Yes.
Marplon. The best science fiction names ever,
Mm.
Marplon. Notice where does his mind control break? It's when they've revealed the machine. Even when they've revealed the machine, he's still shaking. But
Mm.
when Kirk is talking back and forth with the machine, Landru, and the machine says, "I reserve creativity just to me."
Mm.
And there's a shot of Marplon, and he raises his eyebrow, and a few seconds later goes, "Is this truly Landru?" That was his aha moment.
Right. This is his moment of true doubt. of really questioning what he's been doing his whole life and why he's been adhering to the will of this sort of I get non-corporeal being that sort of appears, which is really just a projection.
It's a projection of a guy with his head floating above a robe. I mean, he's wearing a dark turtleneck.
Yes.
But isn't it weird that he has no neck?
Yeah. And, so I think there are some really interesting little aspects in this, like those moments where we see, but again, those people, I think the impression, particularly, if you were watching it back then, is that, these guys that are resistant, that are actually suffering from true coercive control, they're kind of, they're viewed as like weak, and Kirk has to, slap them around.
Be a man.
Right, he says that. I think he says, like, act like men.
Yeah, he actually says, be a man. And then he says the most unhelpful thing ever to say to any cult survivor afterwards. I've got it. Well, Marplon, you're on your own now. I hope you're up to it. You can get rid of those robes, and if I were you, I'd start looking for another job. Right. It's like, oh, gee, Jim, that's really helpful.
Oh yeah, and again too, the in this society, everyone has sort of a particular job and a niche that they work in, dictated by Landru. So again, this sort of good luck with all that.
Yeah,
I mean that's why people stay in groups like this, because they don't know how do I get a job.
Well, like Spock said, when the lawgivers rush in as soon as Landru's no longer in their heads, they have no guidance, possibly for the first time in their lives. This is 6,000 years.
Right.
6,000 years. They don't have a culture anymore that there's nobody who remembers what it was like to be free. These guys were like little quivering rabbits because at any moment they could be taken away into the desert, and actually just shot to death by a long hollow tube with no mechanism.
Yes.
Still don't know how that one works.
Yeah, I know, that was a weird sort of little aside. I thought there was going to be more to it. I thought for a moment that it was, that it wasn't really like this sort of like Hollywood mind control, that it was actually just that the people believed this so much that a hollow tube that wasn't actually doing anything could make them, could kill them, that they could have like a heart attack out of the I thought that's sort of where they were going, but then they never really picked up on the fact that Spock said there's nothing to this tube.
Yeah, and you could go into if you believe you're cursed, you can, fear yourself to death, but that's, I'm not sure, I do know that they do use a sonic knockout tone here. I've got that in my notes. And how many episodes does that appear in where there's a loud noise and it knocks everybody out?
Yes, everyone falls asleep. There was one other thing I just wanted to, again, just to kind of pick up on is the notion of, that the people that are truly under mind control are sort of looked down upon, by the viewers. Yeah. I think we're meant to
be men.
Yeah, which is that's a problem with a lot of the kind of like pop culture undue influence, is that, they're weak, they're stupid, they can't do anything, and it's, man up already, even though they're
to be rescued.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's another one. Right. They're not capable of doing this themselves, which is, I mean, people leave groups like this because they choose to leave, not because someone kidnaps them or, shakes them out of it. Like that doesn't work.
That was the whole thing with what they used to call deprogramming. Was it was almost as in fact, sometimes more harmful than the actual cult itself, kidnapping somebody and starving them and not letting. No. Oh, but I also found this is an interesting one, that when they're talking the computer, and they're talking the computer to death because they can't shoot it. But and there's a listener poll for getting whatever prizes. How many episodes do they talk a computer to death in Star Trek? But in any case, here's the thing, is that Kirk asks, what have you done to do justice to the full potential of every individual? So this computer really is controlling everybody. But would the computer take Kirk's word for it?
I don't
Do you
know.
think in reality, if the script hadn't told it, oh my God, I really am killing the body, help me, help me, help me, smoke billowing out of the computer, would it really? No, I would probably go, no, sorry, you're wrong.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right. I mean, um, that's well. There's something very, human and fallible about this computer as well. That you could really talk it, like you said, you could talk it into
Yeah,
killing itself.
I'm sorry, but well, maybe they have better voice recognition than we have.
Hmm. There's also another thing too is the again, and this is sort of like a broad statement maybe, but I think it applies here. No one is ever that mind control as Sulu
No,
is, or
no, and they're walking around all step in pace. Did you notice that's
yes, yeah,
kind of like
yeah.
a call out to Wrinkle in Time on the world where everybody's doing everything in rhythm?
Mm. Yeah, no one, not even under hypnosis, would you ever be this sort of controlled. And
Or that creepy as the guy who walks up to, yay, man has a room for
yes,
you. It's like, get away.
yeah,
You're scaring me.
right. Because again, even people in big. I mean, I mentioned before the film Wild Wild Country.
Mm,
And Rajneesh and stuff. I mean, and everyone would say, oh, they all had that look in their eyes. Okay, yes, they might have, had that kind of blissed out look, but even that, they were not automatons. These are still
exactly.
people
Yeah.
that have feelings and emotions, and like all people in groups like this, they always have doubts. No one fully believes in
Oh, yeah.
anything.
No, you always have the doubt. It's just how far down you can push it. I
Absolutely.
remember when I was in my group and we believed some pretty crazy shit, as we've discussed privately. There was always still that little tiny voice like, are you really sure about this? Are you sure that this greasy teenage guy is really in charge of the whole damn universe? No, of course. But yeah, there is a lot of certainty, and that certainty can push out the doubt. That being said, no, nobody is a complete automaton. But as for the glassy-eyed stare, that depends on how much sleep you've been
Yes.
gotten. If you're a Sea Org member and you're going on 2 hours of sleep a night, you're going to have that glassy-eyed stare.
Hmm.
Or they have that training routine where you have to stare. Other groups use that where you do the stare. I remember talking to Steve Hassan, and he was telling me about how he went on a TV show and they were doing this stare at him to stare him down. And he said, I was trained to do that. Let's rock and roll.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But no, that's the thing is that this is the Hollywood portrait where you
Oh,
can literally snap your fingers and someone is your complete and utter slave and they will do whatever you want. I mean, it just doesn't exist. Not even, if we're getting out there, not even like a Sirhan type
yeah,
scenario. I mean, even that, and I'm not saying people should believe
that's
one thing
the,
or the other,
yeah.
but even in that, the mind control aspect of a Sirhan, that was only a few seconds.
And also the other thing is that it is what people don't get is that it's not the whole person. It's just the stuff that's in relation to how much control the group has. If they're still going to decide whether or not they want raspberry jelly or strawberry jelly. They're still going to be able to go down the street and work at their job if they have an outside job.
Right.
It's only when you talk about the stuff that actually exists in the part of them that is part of their group, so that more encompassing the group is. But say take some of the Tai Chi sort of cults. Not that all Tai Chi is a cult, but there are Tai Chi cults where there's the difference between the people who just take a few classes at the center and the people who live there.
Mm.
So
Yeah,
that the people,
absolutely.
yeah, they're still technically cult members because they're giving a lot of their money and their energy to this abusive group, but they're not blissed out all the time. They go to work, they have their kids, they do stuff, they play football on the
Mm.
weekends. Um, and so that I feel that it's really, yeah, it's never going to be a full person machine like the Wrinkle in Time. What's the name of the planet in Wrinkle in Time where they where they're all in rhythm.
It's escaping me. I can try to Google it though while we're talking.
Yeah, we dueling Google here. But yeah, you talked also about them using, they were all just members of a body. You bring an infection, the body will be cleansed. I was typing while watching this.
Yes,
And
no, I mean a lot of this language that they're all, and again that they're all part of this greater body that's going to do good for the world. I mean, this is all very, again, this is stuff that you hear every cult in the
oh yeah.
world is always talking about. We're gonna make the world better again, and we're gonna do
So
all
where
these.
I will say though, this one is more about the maintenance of a established status quo.
Yes, well, it was
Me-
maintaining the computer's
Oh
perception of
yeah,
reality.
of peace, tranquility, and goodness,
Mm.
I believe are the three watchwords, which makes me wonder what happened in the first couple of centuries. That would have been to me, a more interesting story is how did it get to this place?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Well, there's a lot of Star Trek episodes like that where I want to know. Particularly, even this might be a good segue to our next episode, a taste of Armageddon. I would have loved to have had a little backstory
Oh yeah,
episode
what
about
was
this.
that? Yeah, what was that well, speaking of, what was that conversation like? Let's leave it with Marplon looking at the hole where where the computer that lived made all their decisions for them, and for some people just operated them like puppets, and they're seeing this computer all in smoke, and there's the three monks and Marplon looking through the hole. And it's like, okay, Marplon can finish here. You wonder what was that conversation like?
Yes, exactly. And we get a little bit of a and again, I don't know if this is what to make of it, but at the end, we hear
Yeah,
there's a sociologist, I think, who stays there.
sociologist Lindstrom. He was the guy who kept on chewing out the father. What kind of father are you for
Yes,
letting your
yeah.
daughter out in festival? And he was like the loose cannon of the
Oh, I was like sure he was gonna die because he kept, piping
yeah.
in like
That's
that.
another trope that didn't happen because you noticed he was a blue shirt, not a red shirt. So
Right, yes, yeah. um,
I'm sorry, was he a? We don't see because he's in costume. That's right.
um, and then we find out that life is normal now because people are getting
Oh
into
yeah,
fights and they're
there's been 4
arguing and
domestic quarrels and a couple of knockdown dragouts.
mm,
That's
which is a weird, that's I don't know. There's something a little off-putting about and Kirk is like, well, that sounds like
oh yeah, and the Federation's going to take over and be daddy and
mm.
quote restore the planet's culture to a human form.
Yeah, so it's very kind of creepy ending. And there's a lot of that in Star Trek, the sort of authoritarian daddy issues.
Imperialism,
Yeah.
imperialistic,
Yeah. Oh,
basically.
absolutely. Well, and Kirk and the Federation, you could are the sort of like colonizer going around. Again, the benevolent colonizer. Oh, you
Oh,
can
here's
become.
the thing. They talk about Landru as the guy, the original Landru who programmed this computer, saying, "Well, he must have the computer didn't have his compassion and his wisdom." It's like, what kind of compassionate guy sets up a society that's going to be run by a computer where everybody acts like puppets?
Well, I know, and the implication
Is
there being that
Landru? Yeah.
if Landru were alive, it would be okay, even though it's a single man controlling everyone's.
Exactly. Yeah. And I'm sorry, but nobody who wears a black turtleneck like that should be in charge of anything. Sorry, did I say that?
And that
I
hair
also do
too.
want to mention that this episode has one of the best Spock eyebrow quirks.
Yes, it does.
When he's coming out of the absorption chamber, he says, "Peace, joy, and tranquility," and then and
Yeah.
the other note that I have about this episode is that this is where we establish that Uhura, her hair and how messy her hair is direct correlation to how much danger the ship is in.
Very perceptive, Spike.
Well, I notice these little things.
Well, let's I think we've done justice.
I think we've done justice. Let's move into Taste of Armageddon.
Yeah, which is this is the one that that we think portrays true mind control, true control over a society in the
Mm-hmm.
way that
Don't see. We don't really see how, though. That's the thing. I looked.
mm,
And I didn't, but we don't see enough of them. You want me to give the thumbnail here?
yes,
Is that there is Ambassador Fox who is under orders to make sure that they get a port at this planet, and he's lording over Kirk. And even if they're being told stay away from our planet, but Ambassador Fox says nope, Kirk, you're going down. Kirk goes down, and they're told that the Enterprise has been declared dead. They find out that this planet wages war by computers. So, if they fire out a shot at you by computer, and everybody who is calculated as dead has to report to a vaporization chamber. And this is happening on 2 planets for 500 years. The Enterprise has been declared
casualty of
dead,
war.
casualty of war. And so they're going to get everybody aboard the Enterprise dead, and of course, hijinks ensue.
Yes, and it's like two rival planets, sort of. I think the second planet, which we never go to, we never see.
Mm-hmm. No, then
They were originally from the main planet, that they colonized the small
yes.
little moon. But for whatever reason, 500 years ago, all out war broke out, and this is very interesting concept that you basically, again, we have these computers, and there's something. There's a lot we could say about that, but this sort of adherence to the computers. These computers control all aspects of their lives in a slightly different way than in Return of the Archons, obviously, but
yeah, you
they're
get the
still being
idea.
dictated.
They're still being dictated to, but you get the idea that it's the government that's dictating
Yeah.
using computers rather than the computers having any kind of sentience whatsoever. Spock says the planet is prosperous, comfortable, and peaceful to the extreme.
Yeah, because you see that they don't even though they're a highly advanced society, they remark that, well, they've never really traveled outside of a very sort of
Because
small group of planets.
They're too busy at war.
Yeah,
But they've created some fabulous art. But oh my God, I'm sorry, I have to say something about those hats.
yeah, I know. I was not a fan of the outfits
The,
that they
the,
were
the
wearing.
fish-shaped hats. Why?
Yeah, and the two-tone pants were a little sort of suspender overall outfit
Oh
was
God.
a bit
Oh
strange
God.
as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
But yeah, basically we've got this presumably two highly advanced societies
In
that
Meteor and Vendicar.
yes, and they basically they get a signal that this 4 city blocks was just annihilated by missiles, and
Mhm.
they're all kind of the Spock and Kirk and everyone are like, what are you talking about? I don't hear an explosion or anything. And then we see that no, I mean, it was just a computer simulation, but all of the people in those 2 city blocks now have 24 hours to report to vaporation chambers,
Mhm.
and they're disintegrated. They're disintegration chambers.
Yeah, and they act as if they're already. I mean, they're already dead as far as they're concerned. You see, the woman Maya, she reacts to her own death. Oh,
Yeah.
when the screen goes, and she's reasonably upset. She's not as upset as I would be, but she's very upset. She's going to have to go, and you can see she's barely holding her. As a matter of fact, I do have to report to the vaporization chamber. So to
Yeah.
them, this is a reality. And here's the thing: this is where you see actual phobia induction. Very much so that there is no other alternative. Either they do this, they commit suicide, or their world will end. There's no middle ground. There's just basically they will they'll start using real weapons, and we'll have to do it. And there's no, well, why don't we stop? There's not even a thought that it's just immediately to, if not X, then Y.
Mm. Mm. And
Yeah.
well, I was going to say these people truly are, under some serious undue influence. And I think that it would be cool to have seen, like you said, more people. We don't see enough. And obviously, one of the main characters, who obviously Kirk is has eyes for throughout the
Oh
entire
yeah,
episode.
because she's got the Vaseline lens on her, or
Yes.
whatever that filter's called, and also
Yeah.
the woo, woo, woo,
Yeah.
woo music going.
She is sad, but obviously, but I don't know. Let's just talk about that whole that again. I think people would kind of miss this episode, in terms of like the more kind of complex ideas that it's presenting, because it's very easy to be like, oh well, they're just all idiots, and again, we kind of get a bit of that rhetoric from Kirk,
But here's the thing: notice this. They don't talk in a highly stylized language. In fact, they talk intelligently. Their reasons are kind of persuasive. I mean, Spock says, I understand. I don't agree, but I understand.
Right, because the idea is that their societies are so advanced because they're not basically blowing up buildings. They're not just, art is still flourishing in both of these societies. And it's something. I mean, they throw out some wild numbers. It's like 3 million people every year
3 million people a year for 500 years. Now, isn't that 1.5 million, I think?
something. Yeah, I mean, it's crazy.
Or billion? Yeah. God, I 3 million. Yeah, 1.5 billion, I think.
Right. But
I think.
obviously, people are still having babies. The population
Still having
continues.
babies, but yeah, but also notice their names. It
Oh
was
yeah.
Maya 3 and Anan 7.
Mm. No, that actually was an aspect I thought would be cool if they explored more. But yeah, I mean, they that's what's so sort of terrifying about this society is things like names and that it sort of seem irrelevant, and this sort of adherence to the state, as this giant monolithic cult, we could say in this case.
The quote is, "We have a high consciousness of duty.
Right.
Our civilization lives, the people die, but our culture goes on." And that's when Anan is saying that he lost his wife in the last attack, and you can see the grief on his face.
Right. But the fear, and this is the aspect, because there is a tremendous amount of fear involved. This is how they are able to control the populations, because even Anon 7 is terrified.
Oh yeah, and notice like when they're dragging the guy away from when they're about to destroy the computer, the guy who's right there, no, he finally breaks. No, I mean, he's scared out of his mind. Or, I mean, and here's like and they are highly logical, and they try to be good in morality. I mean, in the council, Anon 7 says, which is the greater morality, open honesty or a deception which will save our lives? So he's agonizing about this.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I mean, they're so terrified of the prospect of, I guess, actual war happening.
And then they have the rhetoric of, well, we already are this. We are these murderers. We are these horrible barbarians. So we might as well kill, but let's kill cleanly and
neatly in a very organized fashion.
Yeah. Well, what was it Kirk says at the end? They had a very orderly. They keep a very orderly society. Real war would terrify them.
Right. And this is part of like Kirk's, I guess, sort of plan to stop them from fighting and to stop the killing, which is and he does it in a very odd way by basically threatening all out annihilation.
Yeah, General Order 24, where if you don't hear from me in 2 hours, blow up the whole planet. Now, we don't know if that's just an empty threat, but Yeah, the Federation. Can we talk about the Federation and just what their ideals really are?
Well, I mean, yeah, and talk about like coercive control, right? I mean,
Oh
this
yeah.
is how again, this is how Kirk helps jolt these mind control victims. We can,
Hmm.
this entire
Hmm.
society out of killing each other by threatening to kill even more of them. It's
Yeah,
kind of a creepy message the Federation has here.
it really is. Well, then Scotty's line: "The best diplomat I know is a fully activated phaser bank."
Right. Yes, I know. There's yeah. It's interesting in Star Trek the pretense of this whole the Prime Directive and
Hmm.
we're so
Oh well, the prime
benevolent.
directive doesn't apply here because they're already star drive capable, so it doesn't apply. The prime directive only
Oh
applies
right.
to planets that have not gotten warp drive capable yet.
Mm.
God, I'm a geek.
Well, I mean that's so yeah. Basically, then you can just threaten nuclear war. Um,
Yeah,
because they can they have a star drive, so
they
it's all
fight
fine.
back. Yeah, they have star drive, so they're able to fight back somewhat. So we can bully them. Yeah, I mean, and then also when he's making that woman Maya 2 listen to him, as we were saying before, he's shaking her by the shoulders.
Oh yeah, yeah, and it's the creepy sort of Kirk shaking but with this like kind of sexual
Oh
innuendo
God,
and he's
yeah.
I mean the it's this classic line he's tell me what I want to know. While he's sort of coming on to her. I mean again,
And
the
then she believes, and then I believe you. I believe you'll help me.
mm,
And the music cues go all woo woo
mm.
woo. Yeah.
And again, these are all tropes and memes that get repeated so much that we kind of begin to believe it. That again, the message here being and Spike and I both think that Taste of Armageddon is a better episode, or it humanizes a lot of these people in a way that maybe Return of the Archons doesn't.
More accurate portrait
Yes.
of what mind control looks like. Actually, I think as far as writing and whatever, neither of them is in my top 10 as far as a favorite episode, as far
No.
as writing and whatever. But as far as picture of this is the highest amount of control that I can see in an old Trek, where you've got an entire population of 2 planets
Mm.
willing to step into vaporization booths.
Yeah, and maybe we can kind of talk a little bit about that idea because this is very much a state run cult. This is a cult based around the preservation of the government, essentially.
A preservation of their culture, whatever that
Yes.
entails. Now, how much else of their daily lives is controlled by these people, we don't know, but we have clues. For
And
one,
maybe elaborate on some of these clues.
all the men are wearing exactly the same outfit with only slight color variations. Um, all the let's see, what else? They're all named with numbers.
Mm. There's also we don't see people working. We kind of only see people walking basically to the
To the
disintegration chambers.
There's that one very grisly scene that's very haunting, actually, to me, is the one where the married couple is saying a very calm,
Mm.
sweet goodbye, holding each other's hands. Do they have an afterlife? I mean, do
That
they?
was an interesting thing, or just the kind of yeah. Is there any sort of spiritual or religious following here? Because
Mhm.
that scene is truly disturbing. And
It is.
it's even more disturbing too that they Kirk and all of them just sort of watch. Um,
Oh yeah, they let 3 people. I counted. They let 3 people die before they decide
and
to
then he says,
act.
"Wait, now stop this!" And then he destroys the chamber. So I didn't quite get that, but yeah, there's
So that they could say no exit, no an entrance, but no exit.
yeah, it's like, well, what'd you think was happening? Yeah, I think there is maybe not an afterlife, but there does seem to be this sort of again almost sort of religious belief that what they're doing is good because it it might mean 3 million people die every year, but
But it's for the greater good.
right, it's not 3 billion people. It's not the entire planet being wiped out. So yeah,
Exactly.
and again, I think this is
And that's the way that even in real, quote unquote, real life, we governments will justify the killing, I mean, of civilian populations to stop World War II, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Now, whatever you might feel about how whether or not that justified that amount of carnage to stop a war,
that was the justification. That
uh,
was the
just
line that we were fed.
yes, yes. Actually, and John suggested that we also take a look at actual historical mass suicides.
Hmm.
Cheerful, huh?
Well,
I'm just mass suicides because there are whole bunches of people that killed themselves rather than face what they felt was worse than death. Let's see.
you
Let's
got
see.
a lot of the Japanese soldiers in Iwo Jima.
Exactly, exactly. Let's see. Various sieges in the ancient world. A whole Teuton tribe of women just killed themselves because they knew they were going to be taken as slaves.
Oh,
Uh,
it's in ancient Rome, suicide was not frowned upon, and it was seen as a if you owed debts or whatever, and you committed suicide,
mhm,
debts could be forgiven for your family. Whereas if you I don't know, just got killed elsewhere. Suicide
mhm.
was seen as like a nice way out. So there's
Oh,
lots of
yeah.
examples in Imperial Rome. Higher ups within the imperial government structure would kill themselves all the time.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And then there's also the Balinese mass ritual suicide, Pupatan.
Mm.
A major one occurred through 1906, 1908. Instead of becoming slaves to Dutch forces, a whole bunch of villages just killed themselves.
Mm.
Let's see, the church. During the Turkish rule of Greece, a whole bunch of women threw their own children over a precipice and then jumped themselves. An event known as the Dance of Zalango. Revolutionary France, a whole bunch of slaves that were about to become, that had been freed, and then Napoleon decided to restore slavery in 1802 rather than become slaves again. Some 400 men and women ignited their gunpowder stores in order to kill themselves and as many French soldiers as possible. So the list goes on and on and on of whole populations killing themselves
Mm.
in order for the quote unquote greater good or to preserve their people or just to avoid something that they feel would be even worse.
Yeah. You know what it also reminded me a little bit. I don't know if you've ever heard of the book or read the book This Way for the Gas, Ladies and Gentlemen.
I've I've heard of it.
Yeah, so it's a collection of short stories by I'm gonna butcher his name, Tadeusz Borowski. He was a Polish writer who was in I think he spent a few years in Auschwitz and also Dachau, and it's a collection of short stories. And Borowski was, I mean, severely traumatized. He actually
Oh yeah.
he was then later he was tortured by communists in Poland, and he eventually put his head in his oven and killed himself.
Yikes.
But one of the overarching kind of messages in This Way for the Gas, Ladies and Gentlemen, is the kind of like toxic relationship between prisoners and also with their guards, and a big thing is that his assertion that it was that clinical and it was that easy. And I don't know if we would say that the people in these concentration camps were necessarily mind controlled, but they were, I mean, dehumanization is a form of that, and
They
it was so dehumanized
were,
that it really was
they
like,
were right.
they were willingly walking into the gas chambers,
Well,
in
they
some
were under
cases.
coercion. They were willingly terrified. There's also a whole bunch of learned helplessness there
Yes.
because you've got somebody with a machine gun. Now, when it comes right down to it, and you know that you're your final moments, would you rather be ripped apart by a machine gun or inhale some poison gas? God, I need a hug.
Yeah, no, I mean it's a dark book, and but it reminded me of A Taste of Armageddon kind of reminded me of that because again, it's there. Obviously, none of us know what it was like to be in Auschwitz or Dachau, but there were instances where people did try to stop this. And there's a school of thought, and I think Borowski would have been one of these people that spoke about this, but that to be so dehumanized, to be so controlled to the point where you didn't resist, even though you knew what was going to happen. And I mean, you can even look at the fact that many of the the Nazis abused the prisoners to such an extent that you had prisoners knowingly pulling the lever, to let the gas out.
To stop the pain. Well, then there's the other thing is that people often forget it's not just flight or fight or flight. It's fight, flight, freeze, or even sometimes friend, or fawn, sometimes called. So it's 4 choices that we actually have as mammals. It's fight, flight, freeze, like the rabbit in the headlights. And that's what you got there, is you got the rabbit in the headlights. Or if you got things like what we sometimes call Stockholm Syndrome, you fawn or friend to try to make it better, try to ameliorate the circumstances. This can't happen if I, roll over and show the jugular.
So, yeah, I mean, very disturbing stuff going on here, but I think all of that does. I think these all sort of work in tandem in explaining how you get this society in A Taste for Armageddon, and the sort of historical suicide is really interesting because there's. I mean, again, that's really is mind control when you're talking about like some of these like villages like in that in Indonesia, rather than become slaves, just everyone will kill themselves.
And of course, they're actually being presented with some very real things, and it's to avoid something worse, which is in the case of The Taste of Armageddon. They have it painted in their mind very clearly that if we stop doing this one horrible thing, something even more horrible will happen.
Right.
So it's kind of like if you don't shun your daughter or let your son who needs a blood transfusion die, then he will lose his place in paradise.
Yeah. Oh no, and we see that time and time again with some of the citizens that we meet in The Taste of Armageddon. Again, where it's all this, well, we have to do this. If we don't, then everything will collapse.
Not for our own words. I'm trying to save a world.
Yes, right. There's also this sort of belief that, well, it's been happening for 500 years, so we're not going to rock the boat. This is established. This is the way it's always been. It's
been our way it's our way. It's been our way for 500 years.
Right. I mean, the generations, people that have grown up knowing nothing else, presumably Anon 7.
Yeah. Well, 500 years. That's how many generations? That's
quite a bit.
Quite a bit. Yeah.
So there's something also I don't know, maybe like the ability of time to control us, when it's always been like this, therefore you can't question it.
You can't question. This is what society is, to the point where, you've got, no, I believe in traditional marriage because that's the way it's been. Well, actually, no, it hasn't been like that. But you can't go in because it's immediately thought stopping. This is the way it is. This is the way it has always been. I would be willing to bet, even though we don't see it, that there is still some resistance somewhere to this. Because notice the heavies still know how to beat somebody to the point where their leader actually has to ask if Kirk is still alive.
Right.
Those guys beat him up. He goes, is he alive? So they still know how to deliver lethal force by beating.
Mm. There's also there. I think you're right. The questioning, particularly I think with the government, we see that there's a bit more, or they're at least aware of maybe truly how barbaric this is, and it'd be interesting. We don't know, but. Obviously one of the leader's wife dies, but like, would the leader actually walk into one of these chambers?
It doesn't seem that anybody is particularly well, the fact that his number is 7
Mm.
looks like somebody has.
Yes, that's true. Yes.
And he doesn't seem like he's a particularly bad guy either. I mean, he actually admits he's out of his depth. He has no idea what to do.
Mm. No.
So that we don't know.
Yeah.
We do not know whether or not. I mean, Maya is obviously somebody up in their upper class. She's one of the people being sent to welcome the new aliens from another planet. So she's got to be somewhere high up in their government or society, True. And yet she just steps in.
Mm. And now I've just lost the thought that the point I was just going to point out there.
No,
I was sometimes when you're recording and I like to just sort of stare, and I was sort of staring out the window and I saw a plane coming by and I completely forgot exactly what it was that I wanted to say. But Spike, is there anything else that you wanted to add to this? This is what it was. Now I remember. One of the things that really got me with this particular episode is and I think this is why it's such a more accurate portrayal than the kind of Hollywood cult mind control brainwashing, is that like you were saying before, I mean, there are some aspects where they know that this is truly horrific. They know that they're doing bad. They know that this is like disgusting and it is still inhuman. They understand that, even if it's very clean and organized, and people willingly walk into the chamber and kill themselves. But I think, and this is true of real groups like this, even in the higher ups, if a non-7 is sort of the overall leader, he's the cult leader, let's say, he even knows that this is bad, that he himself has doubts about this. He understands that this is it's idiotic, but we have to do it.
It's our only alternative.
Right.
And that's where the thought stopping comes in. They don't even think beyond, if we stop this will happen. And now they're going to send, it's like, no, pick up the phone and talk to them.
Right.
Which that would be interesting to see. This is actually one of the few Star Trek places where they leave the planet, and I actually might think that things might actually work out. It's like when they leave the world with Landru's world, what are they really going to have? This sort of thing, or when they leave the planet where everybody's fighting in that battle royale sort of style. Yeah, they're really going to leave the brains in charge of educating the world
right.
to be. Yeah, sure. This is one of the few times that I see when they leave the planet, there might actually be hope for this guy who's threatened to put Scotty in a penal colony for disobeying, might be able to broker peace between two planets. Yeah, maybe not, but there's more hope here.
Yeah, and I think that's also again, that's sort of a nice way of ending not only this episode but our episode on this, because I think it has that, there is that hope. There is, things do get better. I think there's, again, in popular culture, there's this perception with cults and these sort of groups that, it's either like you either just sort of snap out of it. It's like Landru is gone. Everyone is out of their, I'm not mind controlled anymore. I'm totally, my own person. Whereas in A Taste of Armageddon, it is slow. It does seem that they're, even at the end, towards the end, where it's like, all right, let's there's a, we have a direct communication to this, to the other planet, and and he's like, all right, let's go. I mean, you can see the look on Non-7's face, like, damn, this is gonna be a really long day. This is like not
It is,
ending.
but not half as long as what did the conversation look like at the beginning of that 500 years?
Right, yeah,
The
totally,
conversation that led to that bizarre little. How did that look?
yeah.
Well, killing each other anyway. How about you guys kill a bunch of your people and we'll kill a bunch of our people? And
no, yeah, that's obviously that conversation is really terrifying. But yeah, I think there's hope, but you also see that it's not cut and dry. Negotiations are ongoing. They're not. It's not like everything is sort of going to be peachy keen. And again, they've been killing, even if it's their own governments killing their own citizens. They view it as, well, their computer picked this target, so that's why my wife is dead. So there's anger there still, but I think it's better than the sort of okay, Landru is gone, be yourselves, and they're all kind of killing each. They're attacking one another still.
Yeah, but it's kind of like, okay, well, and also you wonder just how totalistic were the governments of Aminiar and Vendikar, and what level of coercion was in place. Now, how are they going to control their people without the threat of constant death? Maybe they didn't want to stop because it was real convenient to keep control that way.
Oh, that was my initial thing, was that this is really, this is the establishment in both of these planets. This is just, it's better. Also, there seems to be this, they're only, so 500 years of war, 3 million dead every year. There's really not a hell of a lot else for them to be doing. I mean, because you gotta assume, yes, there's like art and culture, but that almost seems like a facade, because it's about organizing. We've got 3 million people. That's a lot of people to kill. You got to make sure you get all of them. There's the people marking down the names. There's the people maintaining the disintegration chambers.
And the direct link to the other planet, so they can immediately tell when you haven't been killing enough people.
Yes, exactly. No, there's so much bureaucracy and the mechanics of how you carry that out. That, yeah, I think in a totalist.
Yeah, and then the unemployed vaporization chamber attendant. They're brilliant. What are we going to do for those people?
Yeah, exactly. No, so there's it does seem like the society is just sort of based on that. It becomes so totalist that there really isn't room for anything else. So yeah, it does make you wonder. Are the people that are kind of maintaining this? Because there's nothing to say that they couldn't negotiate. I mean, they have it in their heads. I mean, I think this is.
So that phone line hasn't been used because it becomes like a blind spot.
Yes.
With thought stopping, once you can't think beyond that stopped thought.
No, that's exactly what I was going to say. I mean, it is so ingrained that this is what we're doing, that even though they know, they can literally pick up the phone and talk to these people. They don't. I mean, you get the sense like no one's even gone into that room. Yeah,
it hasn't been used for hundreds of years. It hasn't been used in centuries.
Yes.
It's and so basically all they needed was somebody to shake them by their metaphorical shoulders to get them out of it. Yeah, it's still not quite accurate.
No,
but
definitely not. And again, Kirk literally threatens to annihilate the planet unless they negotiate. And he seems kind of like he's gonna do it. I don't know.
And I think it's just, they say they're targeting just the major cities and installations so that there would be enough people then to, rebuild and whatever. And then, of course, the vaporization, because he says, well, even if we'd had to do January 24, they would then have that mess and they'd have to survive from it. So even the worst case scenario means that culture gets knocked out of that loop that it's been in.
Right. Just, again, kind of a scary message to jolt people out of being in a totalist society like the one that is depicted here. So, I don't think this episode really gets everything spot on, but
it takes a long time to get away from the programming. It really does. I mean, it was years after I got out of my place that I finally realized, oh, that bit of thought pattern is still in there. You can take the girl out of the cult, but you can't take the cult out of the girl.
Well, and this is something that I think we'll explore in future episodes. Is the the speed that Hollywood provides.
Yeah, well, I'm still trying. I think that we should get you into Voyager so you can see the exact, because the best deprogramming method is in Star Trek Voyager, and anybody who knows Voyager will know what I'm talking about. It's the deprogramming, or not but the deborgification.
Yeah.
We can talk about that later.
Yeah, no, and like we said, there's a lot of other shows and things that we want to cover. There's also there's some new shit like things like The Path, which I've not seen, but I suppose that, John I know and Yuval are big fans.
John has been getting on my case to watch it, so
yes,
I have to.
We will definitely cover The Path at some point. I think that's probably the most accurate portrayal of a high control group.
And Harry Potter heads can check out my latest blog post at openmindsfoundation.org, where I talk about why Harry Potter actually, though, despite being an abused child, still has self-respect that might not be necessarily the level of an abused child would experience.
And and I also want to encourage people, if they have their own suggestions, if there's shows or episodes or movies, books, and stuff that you'd like Spike and I to cover in this series, do let us know.
We'll do anything but Twilight.
Yes, exactly. Oh my God, please, yeah, anything but that. But we've already got some interesting ideas. There's a wonderful King of the Hill episode.
Yes.
That deals with a really kind of wacky cult, and that's actually I think is a good portrait. Yeah, and that really kind of shows both sides, how people can get indoctrinated, the types of people that are more susceptible versus, and I think it kind of shows the reality of that, which is I think different than a lot of people. You have to be an idiot to get into a cult, and King of the Hill kind of throws you for a loop with this particular episode. So there's lots of other things we want to explore, and again, I think it's so important because we're so influenced by popular culture. Whether we like it or not, whether we want to accept it or not, our views on groups like this are very much dictated by the media. And I've not seen it, but just as like an example, there was that new show about Waco, which I believe was actually a more not positive, but a more humanizing portrait of the Branch Davidians. But again, those sorts of shows influence the way we view these sorts of groups. So a really fun series. I'm excited. Spike, I guess just let everybody know again where they can find your work at Open Minds.
openmindsfoundation.org.
Excellent. And we will link up to some of Spike's recent blog posts over at openmindsfoundation.org. Thank you all so much for listening. If you enjoyed this show, then we encourage you to share it with your friends, your family, put it on social media. We are, of course, on YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram and Facebook. You can find all of that. We'll link up to that for the post for this episode. We are in the process, I know I keep saying this, of getting on iTunes and tune in a bunch of other podcatchers. We, this is a promise that we will be on those in the near future. Just some technical things we've got to hammer out with all of that, but we will be up on that, and of course I'll let you know when that does happen. And if you want to listen to any of my other work, including interviews with John Atack, Yuval Laor, and other people, you can always go to porkinspolicyreview.com. That's my main website. But thank you all so much for listening, and we will be talking to you very soon.